Welcome to the Psych Central Show, where each episode presents an in-depth look at issues from the fields of psychology and mental health. With your host, Gabe Howard, and featuring Vincent M. Wales.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Psych Central Show. With me as always is Vincent M. Wales.
Hello there.
And my name is Gabe Howard, and this week we are going to ask the question, what's the difference between mental health and physical health? Vin, what do you think the difference between mental health and physical health is?
Perception, mainly. I really don't understand why there is such a huge difference in people's minds on mental versus physical health. I mean, after all, your brain is an organ, just like your heart or your liver or your kidneys or whatever. And so it's just an illness of your brain.
Well, hang on a second. Hang on.
Okay, yeah, let's hang on.
You say it's an illness. You say it's an illness of the brain. Okay, but brain cancer is also an illness of the brain, is it not?
Yep.
Well, and brain cancer.
But they're all different kinds of illnesses for different things. You can have a tumor on your kidney, but that's not the same thing as kidney failure, which is not something you can look at and see physically. It's something you've got to measure, right?
Right. Okay, so we've got mental health and physical health, and these encompass two very different things. I mean, physical health would be an example, a broken leg. That's physical health, right? The flu.
Sure.
The flu. Yeah. The things that we can touch malfunctioning, physical health, right? The things that are in our heads, so things that affect our personality, our perceptions, our behaviors, that would be mental health, correct?
Okay,
so we can see why we divide them up from a medical standpoint.
All right, sure.
So is there any reason to divide them up for any practical purpose? Should we look at these two things differently?
No, not really. I don't think we should. But it's not hard to understand why people do. With illnesses of the brain, there aren't what people would refer to as markers, so to speak. Now, yes, today we can take a person and put them in an MRI, and we can show the differences between a healthy brain in how it operates and a brain with a particular mental disorder and what it looks like under the scanners. So we can see these things, but that's usually only valuable in retrospect, in an analysis kind of thing. It's not like you can stick somebody in an MRI and look at it and say, oh, you have depression, or you have bipolar disorder. Whereas you can pee into a cup and they can tell you whether your kidneys are working well or not. So it's a different kind of thing. But that's because I think the brain is so complex. There is no other organ we have that comes close to the complexity of the brain. It is, I think, just a matter of time before we have the kind of physical markers that we can look for to diagnose mental illnesses. We can't do it just yet, but I'm sure that day is coming.
Now, when you say physical markers to diagnose mental illness, you mean like a proof positive 100% test? Like, for example, you can draw some blood, run it under a microscope, and tell me that I have cancer, for example. But you can't pull Gabe Howard's blood out, run it under a microscope, and say that he has bipolar disorder, even though I do. And you believe that the day is coming that they'll be able to, I believe you said, pee in a cup or draw blood.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what form that will take, whether it's going to be a urine test or a blood sample or whatever. But there's going to be something.
A definitive test.
Yes.
One of the criticisms right now is that there is no definitive test. So some people call mental health diagnosis as a soft science, whereas physical illnesses are diagnosed via hard sciences.
And some deny it outright too. But just like, many years ago, people denied the whole germ theory of disease. Germs aren't real. They don't exist. We can't see them. All right, then.
This is actually a very good point, because in our history, there's been lots of things like this. The world is flat because we haven't proved yet that it's round. There are no planets other than Earth because we hadn't been to space. You use the germ example, which of course understanding germ theory has lengthened our life greatly, because we're no longer getting infections every time we step on a rusty nail. But they all were preceded by this idea that you think it exists, I don't think it exists, you can't prove it, so therefore it doesn't, and then science progressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
So you feel that the science, and I feel this way too, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you believe that with more research, we'll be able to get those definitive tests so that, people that have, mental illness will not be told that they're faking anymore.
Exactly. I don't know how long that's going to take. It may not be within our lifetimes, but it's inevitable, I think.
I think it's certainly not going to be within your lifetime, Vin, based on your advanced age.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, there's a lot of research into. The other day I was, and I say the other day, 2 years ago, I apparently am also aging rapidly. My doctor, my psychiatrist, took a swab inside my mouth and was able to send that off to the magical lab that I don't understand. And this helped her understand what medications were more or less likely to work, I'm going to say, with my body chemistry.
Right. It's fantastic, isn't it?
It's absolutely fantastic because, one, we talked about how medication with mental illness are diagnosed before. It's an educated guess by a psychiatrist, and then you monitor the symptoms. But anything that we can do to close that window, less trial and error, and less horrible side effects, the better odds we have for the patient. So this is a way that physical illness and mental illness are, the gaps are bridging. It's coming together.
Yes.
But I want to talk about this for a moment. So as somebody that lives with bipolar disorder, I've experienced depression. And the one thing that I'm always shocked about is that people are surprised when I say that depression is physically painful.
Oh, yeah.
Because they say that, why is depression physically painful? It's just depression. It's, of course, my second favorite phrase, all in your head.
Gotta love that one.
It's my third favorite one after pick myself up from my bootstraps and you have so much to be happy for. Why are you miserable?
Yeah, depression has a lot of physical traits to it that people unfamiliar with the disease have no clue about. And one of the interesting ones is that depression has a tendency to mess about with your immune system, making you more susceptible to illness. And that's something that I've been dealing with just recently, as you know. My depression flared about a month ago, and it's been pretty bad since then for reasons I don't need to go into. But I also found myself waylaid in the hospital for a couple of days with what has turned out to be a case of pericarditis. It's an inflammation of the pericardium around the heart. And I have to wonder, is there a relation there? I mean, yes, I did have a cold prior to this, and my doctors told me that that a pericardial inflammation is usually the result of having had a virus of some sort before. But I have to wonder, is it also because my immune system was compromised because of the depression as well? So in my head, that's, there's something suspicious about the timing, I guess.
And the research sort of holds that up. You can certainly see where, let's say you're in the middle of a depressive episode. You're depressed, and the lethargy is the most common symptom that the lay person, somebody that's not experienced depression, can understand. We've all seen people depressed. Sure. It's always depicted as somebody laying in bed, unable to move. So we'll describe that as limbs being really heavy, constantly tired. You can see where not moving around, not getting a lot of exercise, probably not taking care of yourself hygienically, not showering, not brushing your teeth, not eating well. I mean, when I'm depressed, potato chips and Diet Coke are my food of choice. So all of those things, even if there's no causal link between depression and a physical health issue, a cold, the flu, etc., depression makes you not take care of yourself. Not taking care of yourself
leads to other problems. Yes, absolutely.
So while we may not understand perfectly how we get from A to B, I don't think it takes really a rocket scientist to figure out that you do get to A to B. Well, I'm glad you're well. We should say that, and of course, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure that's the word I would use yet. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But
I'm glad you're getting there. Some other things that we talk about when it comes to mental health and physical health being so incredibly separated in people's minds, and I like the word that you use. It's perception. First off, we're all one being. So if our mental health is affected, our physical health is going to be affected. But let's talk about it from the other direction. Your physical health driving your mental health. For example, let's say that you had no mental health issues, Vin, but all of a sudden you found yourself in the hospital for a few days with a heart issue.
Yeah.
Do you believe that could adversely affect your mental health?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I know that at some point I've read about studies where people who've had heart attacks, for example, are much more prone to develop depression during their recovery periods. And that doesn't surprise me in the least. I mean, circumstances can affect depression, can bring it out in you in certain cases. Lengthy diseases or recovery from diseases or conditions certainly is going to have that effect on you.
I think the general public understands the idea of, we'll go with a death in the family causing depression. Now it's grief, actually. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but if somebody that you love passes away, your mental health takes a hit. A lot of people say they're experiencing depression. It's actually, grief, but it's still...
Although grief can become depression if it goes on for too long.
Of course. But there's an example of something that happened that led to a mental health issue. So again, it doesn't really take... It doesn't take a lot of introspection to understand that if you get in a car accident, break both of your legs, and your hobbies are marathon running and yoga, and now you're sitting in the easy chair watching daytime television, that one might have, we'll just go with a generic mental health issue.
Let's go with generic, yes.
Let's go with generic mental health issue. So we can see where physical health can drive mental health can drive physical health, and they all live, of course, in one person. These are all illnesses, disorders, maladies, symptoms, problems that affect a single human being. They're not separate. Right. One is going to impact the other. So that raises a very important question. Why? Why do people see it this way? Because people do. I mean, let's first state that unequivocally. People do not think, not everybody, but most people do not think that mental health and physical health have anything to do with the other. Mental health is something that happens to that 1 in 5, and physical health is something that happens to everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as with most issues in our world, it all comes down to education. People are ignorant of this because they simply just don't know any better. They haven't been informed. That's why we're here.
That is why PsychCentral.com exists, and that's why the Psych Central Show podcast exists. But I've had this conversation with a lot of people. Definitely more than the average. I'm a mental health advocate, for Pete's sake, and I'm shocked at the number of people that give me resistance. There's a lot of resistance to this concept that everybody has mental health. And I've said that before. Everybody has mental health. Somebody goes, well, there is a lot of pushback. Why do you think that is?
Well, when you phrase it that way, mental health, I have no idea how somebody could deny that. I mean, we all have a mind, we all have health. Therefore, now if you were to say everybody has mental illness, I could see some pushback on that, even though I would say that's pretty much true too, because we all at some point or another are going to have something that would qualify as even a brief spell of mental illness. So I'd have to say stigma is a big one. People don't want to associate that with themselves because we still have this, I'm not crazy kind of thing. It's could be any of these things.
It's probably all of those things. So without diving too far down, this is a great conversation because to you and I, we're just flabbergasted that this would even be a conversation. See, I think the way that we talk about mental health and mental illness is just wrong. And the reason that I say that is because we always say mental health and mental illness. This is really kind of a catch-all that it's just way too broad. Grief is mental health, and severe paranoid schizophrenia, where you think that bugs are crawling all over your body, is also mental health. So imagine if we use the catch-all physical health to mean everything. So terminal cancer and sneezing both fall under the physical health catch-all. So when somebody says, "Hi, I'm physically ill," you don't know where they are. But we're constantly talking about the mentally ill. More and more people are accepting mental health diagnoses. For example, 13% of the population takes antidepressants, which is at an all-time high, and certainly, much higher than it was even 10 years ago. I believe Scientific America said that antidepressant use, or SSRI use, has doubled in the last decade. So people are seeing value or more understanding of mental health conditions, but they still look at it as completely separate from physical health. And, obviously we've got the stigma, we've got the discrimination, we've got people not wanting to think they're crazy. But at the end of the day, your mental health and your physical health is still your overall health. So I don't know that we're ever going to get to the bottom of the resistance to this, except to say that, hey, being labeled as somebody with a mental illness or with a mental health issue is frankly just not something that people like to hear.
It doesn't help at all that there are people out there who outright deny that mental illness exists in any form.
And it's not just, when we say that they deny that it exists in any form, we're not talking about, small places. We're talking about churches, religions, big groups. The anti-psychiatry movement is huge amongst people that wield real power in government and in our country. They have a real following. This isn't, some, I was going to say fringe nut job, but it's not some fringe person that's yelling on a street corner. This is right. These are people.
We have in America, we have a very, very disturbing anti-science trend. I mean, just look at the anti-vax movement, which just makes me want to vomit. It really does. I mean, vaccines have done so much for this world just in the past 50 years. But a lot of people today they have no experience living in a society where polio, for example, was running rampant and killed people left and right. They don't have any memory of that. So vaccines just don't seem to be important anymore, apparently.
Well, what's the famous saying? Those that don't understand history are doomed to repeat it.
Doomed to repeat it, yeah.
And those that do understand history are doomed to watch other people repeat it.
Yeah, but unfortunately we get caught up in all of that. So I don't want history repeating on me that way. Thank you.
Fair enough. The takeaway of all of this is a person is a person is a person. So our bodies and our mental health, our brain is inside our heads, which is inside our bodies, and our mental health and physical health should not be separated. We shouldn't think of it separately. We shouldn't ask our medical establishment to think of it separately. And in order to be the best us we can be, we want to be both physically and mentally healthy. And denying that mental health issues exist in you is not the way to do that. We must take it more seriously. I believe the great advocate Patrick Kennedy says we need a checkup from the neck up. And, well, that's just a great rhyme, and I think it's a good thing to end on. Vin, wouldn't you say?
I would.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning into this week's edition of the Psych Central Show, and we will see you next week.
PsychCentral.com is the internet's oldest and largest independent mental health website. Psych Central is overseen by Dr. John Grohall, a mental health expert and one of the pioneering leaders in online mental health. Our host, Gabe Howard, is a professional speaker, award-winning writer, and mental health advocate. You can find more information on Gabe and his work at GabeHoward.com. Vincent M. Wales is an award-winning speculative fiction novelist and suicide prevention crisis counselor. You can find more information on Vincent at vincentmwales.com. If you have feedback about the show, please email talkback@psychcentral.com.